All right, peace to you, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Now, in today's video, I want to speak about a phenomenon which I have seen gaining traction, gaining momentum recently, and it's something I've talked about a few times on my channel, but I want to elaborate on it a little further. And that is I don't know, because there's no specific name for it, but I suppose the phenomenon of people joining traditional religions, not necessarily because they see them as the truth, but rather as a counter reaction towards modernity. So, as we all know, modernity has failed. It has failed in a flaming, glorious catastrophe. We've seen it. It has destroyed the family structure. It has destroyed people's morality. It has made and produced a society which is so devoid of any real meaning, any real philosophy, any real objective purpose that the people are suffering now. The people are just coping with drugs, pornography, video games, delicious but probably not so good for you foods. We're just trying to find a way to distract ourselves from the extremely vacuous and vapid lives we live devoid of any meaning. And this is all a result of modernity. And what people are doing as a reaction to this is many people, they're trying to find, and not necessarily because they believe these faiths to be the truth, but they're just grabbing on the shelf the nearest religion, the religion that is nearest to them, and joining that as a reaction to modernity. So you'll find, let's say, I don't know, an Arab guy, right? An Arab person as an example who he's sick of the born and raised in the West, of course. He's sick of the modern world. He's sick of the degeneracy. He's sick of the vacuousness and lack of meaning. And then he just joins the Hadith and traditional Sunni religion because it's, of course, the closest thing that's to him. Or you'll find, let's say in the case of Elliot Hulse, he's a Belizean guy, or at least half Belizean, half, I don't know, some type of European that on his mom's side, but the closest thing to him from Belize, his Belizean side, was Catholicism. So he joined Catholicism, right? It was the nearest thing on the shelf that he was able to grab with ease. And he did this as a reaction against modernity. And what I want to discuss is, at least what I want to elaborate on, is how men who do this, men and women, mainly men who are grabbing the religion or the faith that is nearest to them, not necessarily because they believe it, again, but rather just as a reaction against modernity. People who do this, they're missing the true point of what it means to be religious, what it means to be spiritual, what it means to be faithful. Now, of course, the word religion in our sphere with me and Brother Sam and whatnot, it has gained sort of a sour reputation. It tastes funny on the tongue when we say it, but when I'm talking about religion, I'm talking about the true sense, true religiosity, not going to the church on Sunday for one day and then living the rest of your week as a fiend or a scoundrel, or the mosque or anything like that. I'm talking about true religiosity. So somebody who lives and dies by the faith they claim to adhere to, drawing upon wisdom from the ancient world and using that wisdom to inform ourselves and our lives and our character and how we interface with the world. True, deep religiosity is not concerned with those matters. So you see these people, they'll often join the mosque, they'll join the Catholic Church, they'll join the Orthodox Church or whatever, as a way to maybe, hopefully maybe I'll find a traditional wife in this institution, a nice, young virgin, she's going to marry me, I get to have this community, and we get to, when they do this, they become a part of a religious institution just as a reaction against modernity. And you'll find most of the time with these people, like either Elliot Hulse or any other guy who does this, they don't seem to care so much about the doctrine of the faith. They don't care. They're more concerned with the traditionalism, right? I want to have a beautiful wife, a virgin wife, and many kids, and I can probably find that in the church or in the mosque. But the thing is, what they forget, and the part that they neglect, is that that's not what true religious faith is about. These things, they are nice, having a traditional wife, having lots of children, if God blesses you with that, also having a community. They are nice, but they are of the life of this world. That's not what it's about, okay? There are plenty of faiths all over the world, and they have more or less a traditional conservative view of the world. You can join Sikhism, you can join Catholicism, you can join, Catholicism is now falling apart, and it's being buffeted by the waves of modernity, but that's a separate issue. But let's say traditional Catholicism, you could join Orthodox, you could join Hadithanism, you could join certain forms of Hinduism. This stuff is all over the world. Just because you have a traditional conservative outlook on life, it does not mean that you have the truth. There are many faiths in the world that possess these characteristics. They live generally wholesome, meaningful family lives. Like I said, these are all things that concern the life of this world, but true religiosity and spirituality is fundamentally not about the life of this world. It's not about necessarily, although it comes as a part of it to a certain extent, but having a beautiful wife, having lots of children. It's about not the things of this world, but rather it is focused on the things of heaven, okay? We are fundamentally focusing in on the afterlife and our state with God. We are trying to, at least if we properly do it, if we do it in the real sense of the word, we join a faith because we are trying to align ourselves with the purpose that the Creator has set out for us. So the Creator has made us, He has endowed us with certain faculties of intelligence and logic and reason, etc. And we are trying to align ourselves with the mission and purpose that He has made. It's based upon the idea that the world has a purpose and we need to live in accordance to that purpose, right? We need to align our actions with that purpose. So I think it's quite superficially minded to just join a faith because you want a traditional wife and you want to be around a community and you want to be around people who hate sodomites and find sodomy disgusting. That's not a good enough reason because they are concerned with the life of this world. And the foundations of these faiths, following the Quran, following the Bible, it is concerned with the things of heaven. And what I would exhort you young men who are deciding to do this, from whatever background you may come from, you want to join some traditional religion because you hate the modern world, I would exhort you to only join if you really believe the things that are being espoused within that religion, okay? I notice with a lot of young men, it's not about, let's say we have a young guy who joins the Orthodox Church, right? It's not about the doctrine. He doesn't really care so much about the idea of Jesus, and I don't believe in this, but let's say for the Christian, the guy who claims to be a Christian who's joining this church, he doesn't care so much about the idea that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and died on the cross for his sins and rose again in 3 days. That's really of no concern to him. He sort of has to pretend to believe in that as a byproduct, as a means to an end, which is to get a traditional wife and to be around a community. He has to kind of fake the funk. And what I ask you young men to do is do not fake the funk. Do not fake a belief system which you don't really hold in your heart just as a means to an end, a means to a worldly end, when that faith in and of itself is not fundamentally concerned with worldly things, but it's concerned with the hereafter. You have missed the entire purpose. We are to focus our head on high, not towards things of the temporal life. I can even recall, I remember one of the friends of my brother, my blood brother, not a brother in the faith, I remember we were talking about this very thing. He was considering, he was a Turkish guy, comes from a traditional Sunni background, and he had grown sick of modernity, right? He's found it as vapid and vacuous and meaningless, as most people do. He hit a dead end with the modern secular world, and he was telling me how he was thinking of joining the mosque. He wants to start joining the mosque, and I said, oh, really? That's interesting. Wow. And after conversing with him for a while, I realized that he didn't really believe the tenets of Islam, whether it be Quran alone, whether it be Sunni Islam. He didn't really care for it. He made a quite revealing comment when he told me, he said that, I asked him, why did you want to join? Because before that he claimed to be an atheist, right? And I was like, why do you want to join? What changed your mind? Why do you want to join the mosque? And then he said that, well, in the end, I want a traditional wife from the mosque, and the faith kind of comes with it. And I thought, wow, I was confused. It was intriguing as well, because I thought to myself, wow, you're really just going to join this institution and pretend to be a part of it when really your heart is somewhere else, just as a means to enjoy some of the provisions that come from that institution. You are, in fact, infiltrating that institution. And I was even trying to exhort him and tell him, like, if you even get the thing that you desire, you find that traditional wife from the mosque, you're her leader. She's looking to you to be the example of that faith. And if you don't really believe that faith and hold it in your heart, that marriage is not going to work out. It's not going to have a healthy dynamic. You're not only fooling her, but you are fooling yourself as well. And this conversation I had with him, is what I was thinking about, because this was just one example of guys there's trying to find some religion or group to join as a counter signal to the modern world. And like I said, I just asked you guys, before you join any faith, before you take any profession of faith, whether it be a baptism, whether you take your shahada, which I strongly encourage you not to do, because shahada is shirk, it's associating a partnership. You're mentioning Muhammad alongside a creed with God. But any faith that you take, whether you decide to follow the Quran, make sure you really believe it. Make sure that the foundational principles of that faith are strong and set in your heart. Make sure of that, because it's going to come around and bite you in the end. If you keep faking, you can't. These things that concern heaven, these things that concern spirituality, the most important aspects of man's life, you can't fake them for too long. You will get found out as being a phony and fraud in that institution. You will be held accountable to standards and morality that you may not be willing to follow along with. And of course, even more concerning than that is you will be held accountable to that phoniness in the hereafter as well. So I don't really know where this conversation is going. It was just a thought that I had in my mind, and I thought I would share some of my reflections on that matter. Just the importance of considering what we stand by, or when you say that you're a Christian, when you say that you're a Muslim, a Sunni, a Shia, whether if you claim that you're a Hindu or whatever, there comes great consequence and responsibility with those statements, not only concerning the life of this world, but the hereafter. And you will be held accountable to those standards that come with that. So think long and hard before you join anything. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's really all I got to say on the matter. I hope this talk was a blessing. And yeah, peace to you. Remember, deceit abounds, so keep your eyes wide open. Peace out.
Peace and blessings in the name of the Most High, viewer. My name is Walid Naeem, and I am a zealous submitter to the one true God, the creator of all mankind. Do you notice something wrong with the world? Something strange? Despite us having a church, synagogue, and mosque in every neighborhood, how has this entire Western civilization fallen into abject atheism, nihilism, and savagery? Why does life just seem so dull, so meaningless, and so devoid of anything real in the Occidental world? Despite the ubiquitous presence of these religious institutions, why are our so-called Muslim sons in large numbers drinking, smoking, partying, and chasing after women, with no seeming desire to do anything more with their life other than satisfy their base pleasures, when God has commanded them to be clean, righteous, and responsible leaders of their community? And why are our hijabi so-called Muslim daughters walking around with tight jeans that reveal their figure, with TikTok accounts posting semi-provocative, self-absorbed videos of themselves online for the world to see, when God has commanded them to lengthen their garments and be modest in their mannerisms? What has happened here? These young men and women are supposed to be making themselves right before God while raising the next generation of ardent defenders of the holy faith. But it seems that Islam features no more in their lives other than a scarf on their head, a Friday fidgeting around in the mosque when their parents forced them to go against their will, or a decorative hanger in their car. At this rate, if God allows us to continue going down the road it is, then Islam and the Quran will become pretty much non-existent in the lives of most of our descendants, if it wasn't already non-existent now. If we do not take a stand soon, in a few generations our children's children will likely be indistinguishable from the secular West. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Our kids to live in? A world practically devoid of the remembrance of the one God and all things sane? I obviously can't speak for you, but for my own self, I can personally say, count me out of it. I'm not going to sit here and just watch my brothers and sisters, those who claim to believe in God alone, believe in Judgment Day, His prophets and angels, and all the other aspects of this holy creed, get duped into going to hell. I'm not going to let this happen without at least something of an effort on my end to reroute this dark trajectory. So, again, how in the world do we end up here? There is a mosque in practically every neighborhood in the West, and no shortage of donations that get dropped in their boxes. They have had lots of funding, lots of time, and unquestioning support from their respective congregations, yet somehow have been run over by the secular atheist. All of their so-called Muslim children go to the atheist, secular public schools for most of their week to be taught beliefs that are completely incompatible with the Quran. And we wonder why they have ended up the way they are. If these houses, and by these houses I mean the mosques, were truly of God, that were doing everything right, then why would our Lord let them get so decisively trampled upon by their enemies? Why do the wicked have all of the reins of power here? Clearly, something is not adding up. Well, it is my thesis here today that the vast, vast majority of mosques that exist in this world today have lost their way and follow a religion which is completely foreign to the Quran. This is why they have failed so miserably in the West, and it seems that God has forgotten them. In truth, the real reason behind their shortcoming is that they, and many of us, have forgotten God Himself, which is why He has left us here collecting our bitter receipts. So, what are my exact criticisms of the mosques today? As a Muslim and a man committed to the truth above all else, what are my personal gripes with their institution, which claims to be for God? The first glaring problem I can think of is that the majority of people who call themselves Muslim have allied themselves with a body of literature that is foreign to the Word of God, treating it equal to, and in fact above, the Quran itself. Of course, I am talking about the Hadith. Listen, the facts are this. There is no justification within the Quran which tells us to follow this hadith stuff, which came hundreds of years after the Prophet Muhammad died, and therefore he could have had no ability to oversee what people have said about him and determine if it is true or false. It is now becoming crystal clear, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, that many things that have been ascribed to him in their most quote-unquote authoritative texts, which they call their Sahih Hadiths, are forgeries that directly contradict God's final revelation. To take these words of men, i.e. the Hadith, and hold them to be equally authoritative to the words of God would be breaking the first and most important commandment, which is to worship God alone, making no equals with Him. To say that these supposed words of Muhammad, which are not even Muhammad's own words, but simply very doubtful rumors about what people who existed hundreds of years after him say he said, that have been decided upon by the scholars as authoritative, holds equal, or in fact any weight in our faith comparable to the verbatim words of God Himself, the Holy Quran, is idolatry. You are exalting man's words to the status of divinity, which should only be given to God's words. Nothing comes even close to the Quran, because God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is its author. This includes the Hadith too, which pales in comparison and is superfluous to the glorious Quran. If you are interested in seeing a full refutation of the Hadith, you may watch my video titled A Defense of Prophet Muhammad, David Wood and Hadith Exposed, which is linked below. In it, along with refuting and putting in his place the worst opponent of Islam on the internet, Mr. David Wood, I also expose how the Hadith is completely contradictory to the Quran and the source of much of the Muslim world's problems. It is a 2-hour-long documentary where I seek to demonstrate the true character of Muhammad in the Quran, defending his history and personality with primary source quotations. I clear the last prophet of God's name from the people who have tarnished his reputation the most, which are certain types of Christians, and, sad to say, Hadith-following Muslims, which have said many terrible things about him. No, Muhammad was not a money-hungry, tyrannical warlord who married a 6-year-old girl. He was a shy, humble, meek man who married adult women, had compassion for even his worst enemies, and oftentimes had a tough time even standing up for himself out of fear of hurting other people's feelings. This is all demonstrated in detail in my video. Once again, the link for that will be in the description under the tab, The True Character of Muhammad in the Quran. So that is the first problem with the mosques, the reason for which I feel they have been forsaken by God, their adoption of an apostate literature which contradicts their foundational scripture. The second point of contention I have with many of the mosques is their seeming unwillingness to say anything controversial which may make them face persecution from their government. The fact that 9/11 was not only an inside job, but the fact that no planes hit the Twin Towers on that day, and the whole charade was a hoax designed by the governments of the world to forever frame the Muslim people as terrorists and justify invasions in our countries, should be taught to every man, woman, and child. This great fraud of the September attacks has left such a lasting, enduring reputation on every brown person, and Muslim in general, that it should be discussed in every mosque. Our people are not responsible for that crime, but it was the governments of the world who carried out that plot and framed us for it. 9/11 is just only one small example, though. There are many, many other quote-unquote conspiracy theories, which are really just conspiracy facts, avoided by the mosques due to their controversy. like the fact that the monetary system in the West is an ungodly scam based on usury, the fact that the so-called healthcare system is a predatory empire which doesn't try to cure anybody, but instead makes money off of human suffering, the fact that sodomite propaganda is being promoted to the masses, including our children, and the fact that the thing which I will call the C19er, to avoid censorship, was a hoax perpetrated by the powers that be to greatly expand their police state, censorship incentives, and surveillance systems worldwide in order to create their new world order, and much more. These governments that have occupied our lands are de facto terrorist regimes, and the mosques seem to say nothing of it. They appear to be more concerned with not being labeled extremists while they live their comfortable, well-funded lives, avoiding topics that are hard to deal with due to the abject persecution they bring. That is my second problem with them. They're at the very least lack of awareness, or if not, perhaps lack of willingness to address the real geopolitical situation going on in the world. And lastly, my third trouble with the mainstream mosques, which can also be put into the category of conspiracy facts, is their complete ignorance on the true nature of the earth. It may sound as a shock to you, my viewer, that the Quran, the Bible, and in fact all of the ancient scriptures teach the earth is flat and stationary. This is the only model of the world which is compatible with those texts and also scientifically provable. This flat earth conspiracy, which should really be called the globe earth conspiracy, is one of the biggest lies of the modern world, we are told, and goes in line with what I said earlier about the endemic corruption of the governments of the world. Everything you have been told about where you live is a fabrication, and the space agencies are a shameless hoax. For a fully detailed presentation on the subject of flat earth, where I demonstrate the science, the history, the philosophy, the verses in the Bible and Quran proving it, and much more, you can read my book titled The Flat Earth Manifesto, which is linked in the description. This work runs to nearly 1,200 pages and is practically a textbook on not only the topic of flat earth, but the subject of physics proper, and I expose the biggest fraudulent religion of the West, which is science worship, otherwise known as scientism. As with all of my work, it too is available for free. No, you do not live on a pathetic speck of dust spinning around in the middle of nowhere in space. You live in a brilliant, intelligently designed terrarium created by God and are at the center of the universe. Again, to learn more, the link to the Flat Earth Manifesto will be in the description. Those right there are my three biggest scores against the mosques of today. There are more points I could bring up, but these are the major ones. These are the controversies which have estranged me from the rest of the so-called Muslim world. Believe me when I say that I would love to join them, and that it hurts me so deeply that I have to pit myself up against the very institution I was born and raised in, the mosques I attended from childhood, whose carpets upon which I walked, stood, prayed, and listened to the preaching in my earliest years. But that is the price to pay for the truth. My commitment to God and what is right is more important than my emotional attachments to a place that was once dear to my heart. Simply put, this is why I think God has forsaken us. This is why I think that the mosques have been steamrolled by the secular atheist. It is because most of us have abandoned the word of God, neglected preaching the truth, and instead chosen comfort over courageous action. That is my thesis to why this great falling away in the West has taken place. If this sounds shocking to you, if it sounds so unbelievable that the majority of the so-called Muslim world could be deceived so badly, then I simply have these verses in the Quran to show you. In the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful. Chapter 6, verse 116. And if thou obey most of those upon the earth, they will lead thee astray from the path of God. They follow only assumption, and they are only guessing. Chapter 25, verse 30. And the messenger will say, O my Lord, my people took this Quran as a thing abandoned. God has really predicted this a millennia ago. He knew that the people who follow what is really right are few and far between, that the majority of men and women are led astray, and the people who claim to love Muhammad the most, i.e. mainstream Muslims, would abandon the glorious Quran. God has revealed to us 1,000 years ago that this all would be the case. It is my mission, therefore, by the will of God, to band together with like-minded believers who have understood the truth and work together to build a new institution from the ground up, founded upon prudent fear. We need to start fresh, start anew. We need to build a new mosque where people can hear the unfiltered preaching from the Quran alone, where men and women can get married, where children can play and be educated in the truth, and where the name of the Most High God, without any associate partners, can be remembered. We need a group of highly dedicated men who will raise and defend this institution with their own hands if need be, and go out into the world warning people of the punishment of God, bearing witness to the truth of his oneness. That is my mission, my viewer. If you found that this mission of mine has touched your heart and is something you want to get involved with, then feel free to contact me in the email below. I am located in Ontario, Canada, and I'm looking forward to form a community with like-minded believers who want to contribute to this great cause. I am neither a nationalist nor racially biased. If you follow the Quran alone and believe in the truth, then as far as I'm concerned, you are my brother in the faith. I prefer you over someone of my own kindred who denies God and commits corruption in the earth. My loyalties are primarily ideological, not racial. Remember, my viewer, that this life is short. Everything we do and don't do is recorded by God and will either bear witness for us or against us on the day of judgment. Hell is eternal, and I do not know about you, but as for me, I want to meet my Creator in the best state possible. I want to spend my life struggling to build up my people, the true Muslims, so that God may be pleased with me on that day. If you are interested in that, then feel free to join me. If not, then find something else good to do which will prepare you for your appointment with the Most High. That is where we are all going anyway. With that being said, I say peace and God bless to all of you good people. Take care, everyone.